You're listening to the Tripping Off podcast. My name's Jesse Lyon, social media, individual, mental health counselor, dream interpreter, hypnotherapist, here to talk to you about some of my thoughts. I'm going to be honest with you. It's been just absolutely a nonsense sort of week. And you know, the people that I've been talking to have also told me that it's been, just kind of a brutal week. Like we're 2 weeks into 2022. It's January 14th right now, but it's been nuts, man. And it's just been a down week. My wife, Joy, has been pretty sick this week. Not with COVID, thank God, appreciate the well wishes, but just other stuff. You know, she's always had some health problems with her. And so that's just been kind of flaring up. And, you know, my grandfather passed away. And so his funeral was just this past weekend. And so I'm just about a week out from that and very emotional. A lot of people that I'm talking to are also very emotional. It's been a rough week for a lot of people. COVID, still a huge thing, and a lot of difficulty. And so I don't know about for you, but in these moments when I need some mental clarity, some place to really ground my thoughts, some place to escape. A lot of people turn to drugs and alcohol. I turn to philosophy, which is funny because really, like, growing up for me, philosophy really was exactly that. It was my escape. The type of personality that I am, and if you've been with the podcast for a little while here at Tripping Off, we've talked about how hypnotherapists really differentiate people into two kind of categories, physicals and emotionals. I happen to be more an emotional, which we'd call a thinker in my terminology. So when I want to escape, I really get lost in my thoughts. And so I turn to philosophy. It's a great way to kind of escape the world, to think thoughts and get lost in my own thoughts. It's my own fantasy. When I experience fantasy, the emotions of storybooks are too intense for me. I get really kind of wrapped into and emotionally drained by the stories sometimes. And so escaping into logic and thought and philosophy is a way to distract me, to decompress and to let go of things without being emotionally drained. I get lost in my thoughts. And maybe some of you can identify. I hope, look me up on Instagram, send me a DM. Let me know if you're one of those type of people too. So I've been reading philosophy. I've been reading a lot of philosophy. I've read a couple books now, but one by Epictetus and another one by Marcus Aurelius. Both ascribe to the Stoic tradition of philosophy. So what is Stoicism, right? I'm not going to go too deep in this. I don't want to lose anybody, bore you with my mundane thoughts here, but Stoicism is interesting to me. And I've met some people who really like Stoicism, and they're kind of assholes. I'm going to be honest with you. They tend to not be very empathetic. They tend to not be very emotional and connected, and they tend to be pretty anxious individuals. In theory, the books are really nice, right? I agree with a lot of what they're saying. However, those who really kind of like hold fast to Stoicism, there's usually some emotional difficulties that they have that causes them to really kind of run to Stoicism as a solution for the problems that they're facing. And so as I kind of ventured into this over the past couple of weeks, knowing that I'm pretty emotionally compromised right now, I didn't want to lose myself and I tried to remain grounded. And so I guess what you're hearing is kind of the mental diarrhea of me trying to remain grounded while also trying to cope with a very difficult week. So what is Stoicism? Basically, Stoicism says that emotions are stupid. They really don't have a lot of place. And anytime that you are sad, frustrated, or emotional, it just means that you're living life wrong. Which you can see kind of leads to a pretty unempathetic response from those who ascribe to Stoicism. I've got a couple quotes here. One from Epictetus, I think, describes Stoicism very well. He says, anything done in accordance with nature is done correctly. And so he says when a child dies as they're growing up, it's like, hey, that's nature. That's how life works. You lose your partner, a relationship breaks up, you lose your job, you lose a limb, back then in ancient Greek times. He's like, hey, don't cry over it. That's just the way life works. The way that they get to this conclusion is they say that nothing belongs to you except your thoughts. Which, if you think about it, makes a lot of sense. I got to be honest, I use that in a lot of my therapy as well. A lot of times when I'm working with someone, we have to kind of go back to, okay, what is it that I thought I could control in my life, but really I realized it's out of control. And so Epictetus would say, hey, if it's happening according to nature, It's the way that it's done. It's done correctly. Another great one from Marcus Aurelius that kind of explains how he delivered this philosophy in order to try and help people is, he said this: "You can remove out of the way many useless things among those which disturb you, for they lie entirely in your opinion." And I think what he really means by that is you can remove many emotional and cluttered things from your life because the only thing that's making you sad about them is your opinion. And gosh, I mean, it's a brutal truth to try and hold on to. Marcus Aurelius goes on to say, like, hey, if you lose your spouse, if you lose your parents or children, or, something bad happens to you, you get sick and die, he's like, it's just your opinion. You thought that you needed those things to be happy. You need to learn to let them go. But it's an interesting concept. Human beings have been trying to struggle with and battle with their emotions for a very long time. And this whole podcast that we're having right here is really, I'm going to title it, My Critique of Stoicism, which is a little bit tongue-in-cheek because here I am, a 28-year-old millennial who's saying, no, I appreciate you guys, deriving your philosophy from Socrates, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius. I appreciate what you said, but I think you got it wrong, which is pretty arrogant of me. But, I mean, that's exactly what I'm saying with this podcast, is I'm saying, hey, I hear what you're saying, but I think you missed something. Because I think when I meet people who ascribe to Stoicism, when I think about Stoicism itself in my life and the lives of others, there's definitely something missing here. You can't just say that emotions are pointless. You can't just say that this thing that every human being who's ever existed experiences is meaningless. And I don't think that they would necessarily say that, but I haven't really heard very well described in their Stoic philosophy an explanation for what are emotions, why are they important, how do they help. So maybe I'm being arrogant because I think that the Stoics were pretty arrogant. To me, it seems pretty arrogant for a philosopher to say, hey, I know that everyone who's ever been a person has emotions, but they're dumb. My opinion about your emotions is that you should get rid of them and that they don't serve a purpose for you. That seems pretty arrogant. I mean, come on, if everybody has a nose and you're over here saying, yeah, noses are meaningless, we should get rid of those. That seems like you're missing something fundamental. You know what I'm saying? So what's my rebuttal, right? I can't go out criticizing without saying my opinion in my rebuttal. Well, my rebuttal would be, and this is what I want to unpack. I think emotions have an incredible place in human beings, in being a human and in living life. One of the things that I see with Stoicism is they really shy away from, and they even are critical of those who are very intense, motivated, emotional, and driven. Stoics are, hey, things come and things go. And so my thought is, how are you supposed to drive progress? How are you supposed to make the world better if you're just saying, hey, that's the way it is, I'm going to change my opinion and just accept it? I think there's something noble to being able to control your emotions, not necessarily control, but being able to be objective and honest about your emotions. That's very important. However, there has to be a meaning. And so my proposition to you today on this podcast and to any Stoics listening is that emotions are messengers. Emotions are important because they tell us something. The problem is, oftentimes, we misinterpret that message. And that may not surprise you if you've followed me for any period of time, because my whole, my moniker, my slogan is, your brain is not against you, it's just misunderstood. Your mind is not against you, it's just misunderstood. I think emotions are a huge part of that. The unconscious mind is driven and run by emotions, connection, feeling, and creativity, imagination. And oftentimes we are very critical, especially in this culture, and especially because Western culture derives from European Greek philosophy and tradition. We are very much in opposition oftentimes with our feelings and emotions. You don't see this in the same way in other cultures who are a little bit more holistic and connected and emotional, relational. This is something that very much is Western culture, and it derives from this philosophy. But I disagree. I think that we're learning, and I think that the change that you're seeing in mental health and tradition right now is that we are understanding emotions are important. They are messengers. Now, you don't have to act on them, right? You get in traffic and you're frustrated with someone, and you want to drag them through their window and hit them in the face. Oh, just me? Oh, never mind. Yeah, I don't want to do that. When you want to punch someone in the throat, you probably shouldn't do that. I mean, if they're hurting your family, if they're a threat to you, yeah, punch them in the throat. But gosh, I'm gonna get canceled for sure. But in those moments when you're angry, that's a message. So don't act immediately on the throat punch unless you need to. But think, okay, what is this telling me, right? I go to work, I set down my laptop, I open it up, I click the power button, and it doesn't turn on. I get mad. What is that telling me? It's telling me, Jesse, you are mad because you had an expectation that your laptop was going to turn on, and it didn't follow that expectation, and now you are upset. And the insight that I can have from that moment is saying, hey, you're running your life without a lot of margin right now, and you have no spare room in your life for malfunctions of technical equipment. You have no spare room in your life for things going wrong, or to take a deep breath and take a moment to slow down and fix problems. You're so fast and rigid and intense that you're not being realistic about how much you can get done in a day. And maybe that's the insight I need to have when I get mad that my laptop doesn't turn on. This happens the same way with dreams. We have these crazy dreams of running from monsters, and it's like, of course I don't want to have that nightmare, but my mind's trying to tell me something. It's trying to tell me there are parts of yourself, of your personality, that you are running from. There are parts of yourself that you are scared of. There are repressed feelings, emotions, and real tangible parts of your personality that you don't like and that you're ashamed of, and you run from them in your dreams and in your waking life, but you don't pay attention to it when you're awake. So I'm going to give you a dream to let you know the message. I think emotions are incredibly important that way. And I mean, this is, like I said, this is the foundation of the platform that Lyon Mental Health stands on. And, I kind of live and die by this. Like, if I'm wrong, fight me on it, right? I want to know if I'm wrong. But it's been accurate so far. And so I hand it to you and I say, hey, take a look at this idea. What do you think? And so I love that the Stoics are in pretty much, in a lot of ways, direct opposition to this idea. And so it sharpens my understanding of thought and of experience by reading this stuff and having to have these arguments inside my head. Now, I will say with Stoicism, there's a lot of things that I really, really agree with. So that my slogan for Lyon Mental Health is, your mind's not against you, it's just misunderstood, right? We know that. But many of you may not know that in my private practice, in my personal business that supports this channel, Lyon Counseling has a slogan as well. And the slogan on the front of my door when you walk into my office says, Lyon Counseling, acceptance through awareness. And that's huge to me. It's literally tattooed on my body. If you are watching the YouTube video of this podcast, you can see me pointing to the tattoo on my body that represents this. It's a circle that symbolizes the whole mind, and inside the circle are kind of two hidden letter A's, right here and here. Acceptance and awareness, I believe, are the two critical words that all mental health problems go back to. And Stoicism just nails this point. And what I mean by that is anytime that we struggle, anytime that we have a problem, little asterisk for chemical things, right? If you're struggling, if your brain can't create enough serotonin for you to be happy, no amount of acceptance and awareness is going to fix that. You might need to talk with your doctor. So let me put that out there, right? If you can't concentrate because you have ADHD, you might need some medication to help with that. Those are physical things. But when we're talking about the emotional side, acceptance and awareness are the two words that fix those. Let's be specific. It starts with awareness. Oftentimes when I meet individuals and they have a mental health problem, when they have a struggle, it goes back to they're not aware of a reality that is intrinsic and undeniable about life. So, for example, sometimes we become unaware of the danger that is living. Oftentimes, at the end of the day, I walk to my car and I get in my car and I drive home. I've come to reasonably expect that that's exactly how it will go every time. And if I'm not careful, I can be unaware of the danger of walking to my car in the dark. And, for any of you listening who have been in a traumatic situation, little trigger warning. I hope that doesn't trigger too much, but maybe you've experienced that where you thought you could walk to your car safely and the reality was you couldn't. And so oftentimes we set ourselves up for things because we're unaware of reality, right? Sometimes we are unaware that our brain operates differently than most. That can be really tough. And so in a lot of ways, the first step is education. I call it awareness. Awareness can save us and can give us peace and acceptance. We'll get to that next word here in a minute. It can give us some peace about things because we understand and we're aware of things that we may not have been aware of otherwise. Stoicism believes in that very, very much. It says, like I said earlier with this quote, anything done in accordance with nature is done correctly, said by Epictetus. It's our job to understand and be aware of what is natural, what is nature. And if it's done in accordance with nature, it's done correctly. But then that second part, that acceptance part, oftentimes we may be aware of a problem, but we don't accept it. A great example would be grief. One of the things, like I said, that was difficult about this week is my grandfather passed away. And I went to his funeral over the weekend, and it was really, really good. I did a lot of work with my personal therapist to kind of get through it and kind of understand what that passing means for me and for the family. And so I was ready for that. My grief wasn't complicated, and I appreciate my therapist for helping me through that. But for others, when we lose somebody, it can be difficult to accept that they're gone. And so when I see and work with individuals who have complicated grief, it always goes back to, I can't accept that they're gone. Or I can't accept that it ended that way. I can't accept that it ended on those terms. Or people who become anxious and depressed because they lose their job. I can't accept that I got fired. I can't accept that this is my fault. I can't accept that that trauma happened to me. And that's where I see people really, really struggle. When we're aware that life is unpredictable like this, and when we're aware that we have strong and intrinsic value, that we're worth it, that you're worth it listening to this podcast, it allows us to be able to accept reality and then move through it. Not get over it, not put it in a box and shove it deep down, but to really accept it. That happened, but it doesn't mean it's over. It's not over until it's over. Until I'm dead, I've still got a shot here. And everything that I go through is an opportunity for me to understand what it means to be alive. Everything that I go through is an opportunity for me to realize what it means to be human and to live with others and to experience life. Anything in my head, any opinions that I have to hold in tension because they may be ill-formed and they may not be the reality of what it means to be here as a person. That's acceptance. I have to accept that it may be different than what I want it to be. And I got to look at my wants. When did I expect it to start being like that? When did I expect that after a traumatic situation, I can go back to my life without ever having fear again? It's not going to happen. You can do things regardless of fear. You can go back into that grocery store. You can go take care of those people. You can live your life. You can get back into a relationship and be happy and in love while still being afraid and remembering the pain that you experienced the last time it went wrong. There's a lot of relationships that I get in. There's a lot of friendships that I have that I remember things that I've been through and they're painful, but I love anyway. And I encourage you to do the same. We have to accept that these happen, but it doesn't mean that it's over. And it doesn't mean that we lose who we are as people. And that's the other part of Stoicism that I agree with. I think one of the foundations and the reason that it stuck around for so long, thousands of years, is that Stoicism believes there are many things that we cannot control. My body doesn't belong to me. I can't control how fast my heart beats. I can't control the breath in my lungs. I can't control the synapses and electrons and neurons firing in my brain. I can't control if I get sick or stay well. Just like I can't control whether my wife, Joy, gets sick or stays well. I can just care for her and make decisions based on what's happening right in front of me. And Stoicism believes that we have to let go of those things. We have to accept that they are not in our control. And that's a brutal truth, but it's only brutal because we expected them to be in our control when really they never were. Stoicism believes very deeply that there is one thing that we control, and I believe in this too. It's our soul. Before you click away from the podcast because you think I'm about to jump into religion, I promise you I'm not. It's an old Greek term that they used because they didn't know about psychology. They called it the soul. I think now we would call it our personality. Now we would call it our will. Right? And so you kind of move forward past religion to some great philosophers like Friedrich Nietzsche. He believed that man has a will to power. And the Stoics would say that's the one thing you can't take away from a person is their will. Someone could come and take my hands away from me. They could lop them right off. And I can't control that. But what I can say is, okay, all right, I'm going to figure out what life means without hands. It ain't over yet. I have will. And that's the one thing you can't take away from me. You can take away my house. You can take away my food. You can take away my body. You can take away my life. You can take away my boundaries. You can take away my safety, my security. But you can't take away my dignity. And you can't take away my will. Because I will survive. It's the one thing. And it's painful. Because sometimes we really have to confront that monster face to face. And it's the one thing that you always have with you. And I promise, no one can take that away from you. They can try and break your spirit. They can try and belittle you and criticize you, but they can't take away your will. And if you will always hold on to that and remember, that's the one thing that is always yours, you can get through some amazing things. There's a really amazing psychologist, and gosh, I hope I don't blank on the name now. He went through the Holocaust. And of course, I'm going to forget his name now, but he's the one known to have founded Imago Therapy. And so you can Google that and see his story, but he said the same thing. He's like, you can't take away someone's will. Now, someone can let go of their will, and they usually passed away once they release their will, and they're like, I don't have a will to live anymore. But people can make it through amazing things, and you can make it through amazing things. And part of therapy is me having conversations with individuals and the pain that they live in their lives, and sharing the pain that I've lived in my life and saying, hey, we'll keep moving on. We'll make it through this. And that's incredible and beautiful. So before we wrap up, there's one more thing. I've talked about what I like about Stoicism, but let's get back to my critique. I've got one other critique. I said that emotions are important because they're messengers, but there's a second reason that emotions are important. And that second reason is that emotions allow us to connect. Empathy is a beautiful, beautiful thing. We even know from psychology and scientific research about mirror neurons, right? Someone bites into a lemon, you observe that and your mouth puckers. Even if I say juicy, flavorful, sour lemon, your mouth puckers even as I say that on this podcast. Mirror neurons. You've been there. You've tasted a lemon. You're imagining me biting into a lemon and you feel it in your mouth. That's your emotions. And what's really cool about people is that we can connect with each other through our emotions. I don't have to go through the painful thing that you went through to feel it and cry with you. I can cry with you without having ever stepped a day into your shoes. And that allows me to connect with you. That allows you to connect with me. And when I tell this story about the painful week that I've had, you're thinking about your painful week. And I'm feeling you and you're feeling me, and emotions connect us in that way. And that's really beautiful. But sometimes we can become overly empathetic. And a lot of the internet talks, it's very popular right now, very in vogue, right? To talk about narcissists, gaslighting and all this stuff. But we often forget that there's another side to that story. There's toxic empathy, just as much as there's toxic narcissism. And toxic empathy is something that I've really thought quite a lot about. And it's when we lose our boundaries, when we lose our understanding and differentiation of ourselves and others, and we become overly passionate, overly empathetic. Almost in some situations, I have seen it to where the person will actually be more upset about the situation than the individual who actually went through the situation. They actually emote and experience more intensely than the person who actually went through it. That's not very helpful, because then you're dragging that person who went through it down even deeper, instead of giving them courage and hope. And this is my critique of Stoicism. If you rid yourself of emotions and you say that emotions aren't important, you lose your ability to connect with people. And I think this is where you see a lot of people really, really find a love of Stoicism, because deep down they're anxious. Deep down they're afraid. Deep down they're worried, right? And so they use Stoicism as a bulwarks to guard themselves and gird themselves against emotion. It takes humility to cry. It takes self-confidence to be humble. To connect deeply with someone requires some really strong self-understanding. And that's really, really cool. If you can understand your emotions and create a very distinct line between somebody else's emotions and your feelings, but still empathetically connect with them, wow, that's powerful. And that's what every therapist should strive to do. And so, I don't know, maybe my interns are listening to this podcast. And so let me pass that on to you. It's so important that you deeply and empathetically connect with others without losing yourself in that empathy. Because if you start to lose yourself in that empathy, then the situation becomes toxic. Then it becomes codependent. And you don't want to do that. And so I think, I got to give some credit to the Stoics. They're trying to warn against this. However, they go too far, and some people lose their ability to connect with others through emotion because they're afraid of what happens if they connect too deeply. Don't be like that. Don't let your fear of emotion keep you from giving people the greatest gift that you could, which is you and your connection with them. And don't let Stoicism keep you from accepting the greatest gift that other people can give you, which is care and love and concern and empathy for your problems, because it goes both ways. And a lot of people who are highly critical, perfectionistic, they're people who are scared. They're really afraid to connect deeply because they'll be afraid that they'll lose themselves. You're not going to lose yourself, but you got to understand who you are, and you have to love yourself in order to understand who you are. And so deep empathy requires an impressive amount of self-value. And so I pass that on to you. That's my critique of Stoicism. I hope it's been helpful. And like Marcus Aurelius said, accordingly, to have contemplated life for 40 years is the same as to have contemplated it for 10,000 years. For what more shall you see? You don't have to live forever. If you're alive, you understand what it means to be human. Pay attention to your experience of life and pass that on to others, and listen with humility, care, and empathy to others. Because as we share our stories, we learn what it means to be alive, and we learn what it means to connect and to move forward and to care for one another. And so with that, I hope you have a great week. Take good care of yourself. Peace. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Tripping Off podcast. Again, my name is Jesse Lyon. You can find me everywhere on the internet at Lyon Mental Health. I'd also encourage you to check out www.lyonmentalhealth.com. We have a lot of free resources there and a lot of ways that you can connect and ask me questions personally. You know, I do dream interpretation videos. We have live classes every Monday at 7:30, and we have our TikTok lives, which are completely free every Thursday at around 8 p.m. We always cap them off with reading a bedtime story, which is a nice way to encourage you throughout the week and to get that little boost of motivation and to relieve some emotional stress by connecting with other people who are like-minded. So definitely check it out, lyonmentalhealth.com. And please, if you're considering getting into counseling and working on your mental health in the new year, 2022, don't forget to check out hdcounseling.com. They sponsor this podcast, and they're a huge partner of Lyon Counseling. hdcounseling.com is actually one of the largest on the East Coast connection of therapists. They work in the Central Florida area, and they do telehealth services all throughout the country. If you're looking to find someone who's going to be a great fit for you and help you in your mental health journey, you couldn't do any better than hdcounseling.com. Many of them do free consultations as well. So see and find the right person that's going to connect with you and encourage you in your move forward. A lot of these quotes that I've talked about today come straight from my Twitter, and you can follow that at Lyon Mental, Lyon Mental. Lyon Mental Health was too long, they kicked me off. But if you want to keep updated with my thoughts and see a lot of the quotes that I've been thinking about from Stoicism, you can always check it out there. But more than anything, I appreciate you supporting me, and I just hope that I can also support you in your life and the things that you're doing. Until we meet again, peace.